the main target audience of this presentation is the undergraduate students of the University of Colombo arts faculty who are following the course Introduction to History in English medium. But I will try my best to present it in a way that the others who are in general interested in historical inquiry find it useful. And but as far as my target audience is concerned, and we have already been discussing the scope of historical inquiry, the scope of history as a system of knowledge in the last few weeks. And so therefore it is intended to provide you more insights into what has already been discussed. So as student who might have learned, who definitely you must have learned history at secondary level in schools, because history is a core subject in the from grade 6 to grade 11. And so you might remember that in grade 6 history textbook has provided you a simple definition to what history is. And if you recollect the grade 6 textbook, see, if I read it out, it has the first section, the first lesson. In the first lesson, it is described as the people have been living on this earth for quite a long time. During that time, they have lived in different parts of the world. B, so they have made the environment conducive for their living. 3C, so they have maintained the relationship with each other. And based on these points, it says the story that describe these past events in history is history, right? The story that describe these past events is history. In short, history means studying and describing the detail of the people who lived in the past. So no doubt that this simple definition and simple explanation may be sufficient for at the grade 6 level, although I'm not very happy about it, but it is not a bad way of providing a basic understanding to grade 6 students. And but at this level, at the university level, this is not at all sufficient. And also it raises some basic issues as to what historical knowledge is. You might have at this level, so you need a broader understanding of what history is. So therefore we can ask the basic question. Even this grade 6 textbook, it is started with what is history. So there's a well-known book written by famous thinker of history, E.H. Khan, whose book is rather well known in Sri Lanka among those who are interested in history, because it has been translated into Sinhala as well. What is history? The English title, and in Sinhala it has been translated as Itihasaya Anukumakda. And it's based on a series of lectures so that he gave in the early 1960s. But actually, since then, a lot of changes have been taking place in the way that historical knowledge is looked at. and so we will be discussing these aspects during this course. But I would like to uh, you know raise some issues related to this basic question: what is history? Or actually, indeed, in the first place, what is the scope of historical inquiry? Right? So when we are talking about historic, history, what we are basically talking about, the uh, so we are trained to you know uh, inquire into what is called as history, as any other discipline, right? So therefore, so that's the objective. And so you might be um you may remember that we discuss uh, the explanation given by uh, a writer called Gorden Leff on history, right? And his 1971 work. And if I read it again, this definition, so which we have been discussing, but for the sake of the others who were not in that class, so I will read it out. Any aspect of man's past, provided it has some bearing upon its course, form a legitimate field of historical study. The failures as well as the successes, the impalpable as well as the palpable, change and differences are its properties rather than order and regularity. To begin with, history as a body of knowledge consists of innumerable individual histories covering every epoch and every mode of human experience, from brewing to mysticism, right? So uh, that's a broader definition. But if you look at this definition carefully, so you will understand that there is something more than the definition that you have been given in the grade 6 textbook. And so there's a similarity. There's a similarity also. Similarity in the sense that, so it says any aspect of man's part. This Gordon Leff definition also say that any aspect of man's past, right? If I remove, for the moment, the middle part, the qualification, any aspect of man's past forms a legitimate field of historical study, right? So that is what is given in the grade 6 history textbook as well. The story that describes these past events is history. So that's what grade 6 textbook says. But what is important to highlight is that this Gordon Leff definition has a qualifying part. So what is this qualifying part? Qualifying part is any aspect of man's past, provided it has some bearing upon its course. So that is very important thing, right? So it says that, first it says that, the any aspect of man, you have to sort of, I would like to underline the term man. The man is in modern day. So this was written in 1971. Modern day intellectuals find it extremely gender bias term, man's past. Then how about women? So therefore, you may read it as humans. I would, if I write this, I would say any aspect of humans past. The human beings, both male, female, and now actually there are other gender categories as well, but covering all what we understand as humans, right? So the uh, when to that extent, it covers everything related to this human's past, right? As long as that, it is quite similar to the definition given in the grade 6 textbook. But this qualifying sentence is different. It says provided it has some bearing upon its course. So therefore, that's a filter, right? So in that sense, uh, which form the scope of history is the past event. If I sort of interpret it, if those events, right, have some bearing upon uh, humans course, right? So there's something, what is this course? Course is a kind of path, right? So this is important, so what it says is that, so then therefore it is not every bit of the humans past, the I mean every deed, uh, what I remember in older textbook, in an older textbook, it says that how history was defined, that I don't remember the English translation, but the Sinhala translation, was the Sinhala version was Atite Kalaki there. What was said and what was done and said in the past, what humans did and the same, that also basically the same, right? But according to Gorden Leff, this qualifying part of the sentence is that everyone would not be part of the human history unless they have bearing upon its course. So that this is very important, right? It's very important to keep in mind. And so then, of course, we know that when we are basically studying uh, the past, so we are not trying to collect information on everything. Of course, we cannot find information on everything that has happened in the past. But even then, I mean, uh, when we study history, so we select. So that is what is important, right? Whether we agree with this definition or not, right? So that is something that you need to keep in mind, right? Uh, although these textbooks say that history covers everything, I mean, there's a meaning of, there's a useful in this definition that history covers everything. But we will come back to it. So it is a different topic, but my fundamental objective of this presentation is to understand how we select, because so we are not studying everything that has happened in the past. I mean, on one hand, we are not capable of doing that, but also we are not doing that. We select. How is this selection uh, done, right? And then and actually Gorden Leff what Gorden Leff does is that he is providing a ground. He is providing a providing a logic, reason, background. A ground for this process of selection, right? Of what is to be chosen from the past to be studied, to make it part of the historical inquiry. So that is it's bearing upon, it's linked to what he called as the cause of humans, right? In other words, it implies that so there's a continuous process. There's a the there's a passage that humans move from one place to another. So that's what a course mean. In Sinhala we can say gaman pataya, right? That, right? And you say course of action, it's a series. So there's a moving thing. And so there are, suppose that that we are traveling from one place to another. Suppose we are traveling from Colombo to Galle, right? So we can take one of the, we can take either, if you are traveling from Colombo, you can either take Galle Expressway, the Southern Expressway, or you can take the old Galle Road, whatever you take. So you pass certain places. So there are certain places along that road. So if you want to know how to reach Galle, so you have to know these places, so that on your way you know that you're on the correct path, right? And so there are relevant information. Suppose that we can take as a metaphor. Let's take it as a metaphor. So like history. So we are moving on a path for a particular destination. We want to know how to get there, right? And so we have to know, what are the places that we pass, and what are the landmarks and all that. So these are relevant information. We don't need all the information. We don't need all the information about the space, right? What we need, because our objective is to reach that destination, that is goal. So therefore what is needed is only information related to the path that would take us to goal, right? Nothing else. So there's a out of the information that are available in a map. For example, let's say we check a map, we check the Google map. In the Google map you have a lot of information about the space, as like Sri Lanka or wherever. But we are not checking, when we are checking the road to goal, we are not checking everything. So we are checking how to reach goal. So what is the closest way, and what is the convenient way, and so on, right? So perhaps this qualifying part of Gorden Leff's definition, the sentence about history, the scope of historical inquiry, could be identified in that way in relation to this metaphor. So that means that I would like to highlight these two concepts. So there are inclusions and exclusions. So there are things that would come into the scope of historical inquiry and that are not be part of the historical inquiry. So in that sense, the bottom line is that as the definition of the grade 6 textbook, everything that are related to historic the human past would not be included in the history. Well, one may say that so the maybe that they are not related to one particular, for example. So if you want to go to goal, if your destination is goal, you need certain information about the road to goal, but you exclude some information, right? So you don't include the information that are related to uh, the path that you might take if you go to Ratnapura or Kandy, right? If you want to go to Kandy, it is a different kind of information that you need, not the kind of information that you need when you want to go to goal. So one may argue that every information related to this the space are potentially useful, right? So that's a I wish that that you understood my point. But there is a different aspect of what Gordon Leff says here. But here uh, it says one destination or one particular path. So that is the human's course. So it sounds as if human has one course of moving, right? Or perhaps it doesn't say a destination, but a path, right? So then it doesn't say that there are different paths, like the path that that we can take to go to any different places, either to Goal, to Matara, Kataragama, Ratnapura, Puttalama, Kandy, Kurunagala, wherever, right? And there may be innumerable places. But here it says only one course. Yeah, that's something else, that would be discussed later in the course. But please keep in mind this idea of course, right? So therefore, that is not the studying history is not necessarily, yeah, in broader aspect one may say that the basic material, the basic let's say raw material, the raw material of historical knowledge is past uh, acts, what humans said and did, what human did in the past, right? So in that sense, that's accurate. It's a raw material, right? But the what do we do when we do something with this, when we engage in particular historical inquiry? It is like that, for example, when you want to produce something, so you have raw material, so you bring raw material that are need, but you are not using all the raw material, right? So you select what you need to serve your purpose. So likewise, when you provide a historical narrative, historical explanation of something, when we engage in a historical inquiry, right? So you choose from the large corpus of raw material that are available in the form of information regarding the human past, right? So that need to be understood. So then what is important? What is important is how to make this selection. How to, I mean, in the first place, I think, if you go by the metaphor that I mentioned, uh, the the example I have been given, reaching a particular destination. So then it is quite clear that what kind of information we need if we want to get to goal or candy for that matter. So we know exactly what kind of information we need. We need the information regarding the places that are along the uh, way to uh, candy, for example, right? Not we don't need to bother about uh, you don't want to understand where is Kurunagala, where is Ratnapura, if you want to go to candy, right? So that's irrelevant. So far that's simple. But is that simple in the case of the historical inquiry? So I would say no. I would say no. So that's why we need to go further. So let's go to that discussion later. So I would continue this discussion with in relation to some ideas by another thinker that we discuss in the class. So that is Michael Oakeshott. So he also famous thinker of historical knowledge. So he uh, uh, so I would he has a considered to be a classic a work called On History, right? So I would like to read from his book. The word history is ambiguous. It is commonly used in at least two different senses. In one, it stands for the notional grand total of all that has ever happened in the lives of human beings, or for a passage of somehow related occurrences, distinguished in this grand total by being specified in terms of place and time and a substantive identity. So there are a lot of important words that I would like to be highlighted. So I have highlighted them in the class as well, but I will come back to it. Let's continue to look at what Michael Oakeshott says. So then he says the this meaning. So this first meaning, the the first meaning. So according to him, there are two meanings, two senses. The first meaning, the first meaning that he says appears in such expression as the history of the world. The history of the world. Suppose there's a book called The History of the World, and the history of Jews, the history of Jews, right? And the history of Switzerland. I'm just reading out from Michael Oakeshott's book, and the history of the Bank of England, right? So, so these are the example that Michael Oakeshott has given. Here, the adjective historical means what actually happened there and then in respect of this identity, whether or not we know anything whatever about it, right? And the markers of such history are participants in the occurrences, right? So so there's a history out there, right? So there's something happened in the past. For example, let's say the history of the Jews, the history of the Jews. So there's a that's one of the examples given by Michael Oakeshott. So there's a group of people known as Jews. So they have been living in the past, right? So they have been living in the past, right? And so that's a particular identity. That's what he said. So there's a group of people, right? And also and at the same time, let's look at this the other one, the history of the early history of the Bank of England, right? So there's an institution called Bank of England, the Bank of England. That's an identity. Identity means its own existence. It is not something else. This particular thing called Bank of England, it has been existed for some time, and it says the early history. Early history means a particular passage of particular period of time. Let's say from the beginning to, let's say first 15 years. I mean, for example, I don't know. Yeah. So maybe that's what is meant by early history of Bank of England. So that it has a particular identity. So that inquiry is related to the early history of Bank of England, right? So that is there, that is out there, right? I think what he says that whether or not we know anything whatever about it, right? Suppose that we don't know anything about it, right? So we will be trying to understand what early history of Bank of England. Let's say that that we fail to do that. We don't have information. I mean, no one has left any traces, because one aspect of the historical scope of historical inquiry is that that we are trying to understand what happened in the past that does not exist, right? So when we are trying to understand something, it does not exist. For example, we are trying to understand the history of Parakramabahu, the king let's say King Parakramabahu's overseas military expeditions. And then, I mean, they are not there, no? So they are not there, right? So let's say there's a conflict in Gaza. It is there. It is still there. It is not the past. And also let's for example, if you want to study the Colombo traffic congestion, so it exists. So you every morning or afternoon, so you can go to a place, particular specific place in Colombo city, and observe it. You observe something that exists uh, at the same time you are living in your real time, right? But that's different. The historical inquiry is different. In historical inquiry, so you are studying something that does not exist temporarily, in terms of time. So it's gone. It's belong to the past. And so therefore the assumption that whether you study it or not, it is there. The early history of Bank of England is there, right? And you try to understand it, right? And so this also need to be highlighted. And the makers of such history are the participants in the occurrences. When you say the makers of history, who made that history? So you will understand the importance of this word later on, right? So I mean, for example, when we are studying the Parakram Bahu's overseas military expeditions, right? The history of Parakram Bahu's overseas expedition. We can ask who are the makers of that history. The makers of Parakram Bahu, his generals, soldiers, and various parties that involved in that expedition. So they are the people who made that history, right? So that's what Michael Oakeshott says. And what is next? Let's further. So there's the second meaning that Michael Oakeshott discuss about history in relation to history. In another meaning, history stands for a certain sort of inquiry into and certain sort of understanding of some such passage of occurrences, the engagement and the conclusion of an historian. Let me read it again because it's somewhat complicated sentence, right? Listen carefully. In another meaning, history, so he used this inverted double commas, quote unquote, history, quote, history unquote, right? History stands for a certain sort of inquiry into a certain sort of understanding of, inquiry into and a certain sort of understanding of some such passage of occurrences. Please keep in mind the Gorden Leff's idea of the cause. Here, Michael Oakeshott says passage, some such passage of occurrences. Passage of occurrences. There are occurrences, they are not isolated, they are linked to each other. This linking, there's one occurrence linked to another occurrence. So that's called, which create a kind of passage, right? The engagement and the conclusion, occurrences, the engagement and the conclusion of an historian. So these are, when you try to, this is a sort of understanding. So that's a inquiry. I would like to highlight this word. The certain sort of inquiry. When you inquire into something, there's an inquirer. If you try to understand the Parakram Bahu's overseas expedition, military expeditions, you are the inquirer. You are the one who inquiry, and then and you are trying to gain a certain sort of understanding. So there's a person who try to, you are the one who try to get an understanding of Parakram Bahu's overseas military expeditions, right? And this is an engagement. You are engaging with a particular past. Which is Parakram Bahu's overseas military expeditions. And then what you do, you come to conclusions. So that's why I say that the engagement and the conclusion of an historian. So they are engage. You engage and you come to conclusions. You provide conclusion, right? So what does Oakeshott says? And this meaning appears in such expression as quote, an historical dictionary of the English language. So compare this is early examples in relation to the first meaning, like the history of Jews and history of Switzerland, early history of Bank of England, and so on, right? So here the example that are been given is an historical dictionary of the English language, or So he provided, a kind of sentence, center quote, when reading Ranke or Maitland, right, one feels oneself to be in the presence of a remarkable historical imagination, right? It's a maybe a kind of quotation from a book. If I read it again, when reading Ranke or Maitland, so these are two well-known figures in historical inquiry, one feels oneself to be in the presence of a remarkable historical imagination. The word that he highlight here is the historical imagination, particularly the adjective historical, right? Please keep that in mind. Or another example, a history of England, a history of England, a history of England, right? Not the history of England. That's a difference, right? There's and the, right? When we say the history of England, it is something that is out there. When you say a history of Ireland, in Sinhala, you can translate it as Engalantaye itihase. Engalantaye itihase. When you say Engalantaye itihase, it is something there. Whether you understand it or not, it is there. But when you say a history of England, it is something that you produce. One, Engalantaye පිළිබඳ ඉතිහාසයක්. Engalantaye පිළිබඳ ඉතිහාසයක්. Right? Something that you produce, you wrote, right? So because that means that there may be another one. When you say a book, I have this. This is a book, one book. So there may be other books. There's in relation to history, a history, right? When you say the history, it is out there. It is not because of your choice, right? Okay. And then he says, here the adjective historical denotes an inquiry which, whatever we may think about the truth or reliability of its conclusions, is recognized in terms of certain characteristics to be an historical inquiry and not one of another sort, right? So here there's a word called historical. That's a historical, this, when you say this, the historical dictionary, right? Historical imagination, a history, and it says that it denotes a kind of understanding, right? Sorry, is recognized in terms of certain characteristics of an historical inquiry and not one of another sort, right? When I say a book, I have a book, not the other books, right? When you say a history of Parakram Bahu's expedition, the overseas expedition, military expedition, so that's one of it. It's not others. One kind of one sort of inquiry, not any other. And also, let me explain it. So this when you say historical, so there may be other kind of inquiries. If I go further a little bit, let's say, let's take the example of Candian. Let's say the caste system, right? Let's say there's an institution called caste. A historical inquiry into the caste system in Sri Lanka. So it's a historical inquiry. Right. One may also say that there may be other type of inquiries. For example, a sociological inquiry. It's not a historical kind of inquiry. It's a sociological inquiry. That's a different kind of inquiry. So therefore, what Oakeshott says here, there are different kind of things. The historical inquiry is one such kind of inquiries. One kind of inquiry that you can then you can engage in order to get some kind of understanding of something and arrive at some kind of conclusions, as he earlier mentioned, right? Um, and it denotes the kind of understanding reached in the course of such an inquiry. So, right, so when you engage in inquiry, so you arrive at some kind of understanding, right? So some kind of understanding. So that's it is that kind of understanding that is what what we call as historical, right? uh, and here history is recognized to be made not by those whose words and deeds are investigated, but by an historian. Please try to understand carefully. I know that this is somewhat complicated, and I mean, in the altogether, uh, this this statement by Oakeshott is, so you need a lot of time. You have to digest it, right? So I have given you the text, and so you have to. I mean, you can even repeat this and listen. Uh, so therefore, I mean, you need to understand it carefully, right? So look at it. Let me read it again. And here, history, the word history is recognized to be made not by those whose words and deeds are investigated, but by an historian. What does it mean? Let's take the example. The example is that, suppose that we study, as I took the example that may be familiar to us, more familiar to us, the Parakrama Bahu's overseas military expeditions. In the case of first meaning that Oakeshott given, the makers of history and Parakram Bahu, his generals, and other the soldiers, and those who took part in that military expedition. So those are the people who made that history, who created that history, right? But when you provide a history of Parakram Bahu's overseas expedition, that inquiry was made by the historian. And so there's a book written by, well-known work, research work written by famous historian was Sirimakiri Bamune. So she wrote, she wrote her dissertation, the PhD doctoral dissertation on Parakram Bahu. So that's her work. That is Sirimakiri Bamune's work on Parakram Bahu. Right? Who made that? Who is the maker of that inquiry? Sirimakiri Bamune, not someone else. Not Amardas Lianagamage, not K.M. Silva, not W.M.K. Vijayatunga, not Michael Roberts, not uh, Leslie Gunawardena. I'm just referring to various other historians that wrote about history of Sri Lanka. So that is the maker, the creator of that history is Sirimakiri Bamune, not someone else. So that's a second meaning. It's referred to a particular kind of inquiry. Right? So it's a production of historian. So I know that this is somewhat complicated, but I stop here. So give you some broader overview of historical knowledge, and particularly the kind of the knowledge of historical inquiry that we are trying to understand in the course of this course unit. So I mean, what I basically wanted was to sort of give you, propose you that, historical the scope of historical inquiry is not a very simple issue. Usually we when we study history, and when history is taught at school, it is generally understood, even among those who are engaged in school education, that history teaching is a very simple thing. I have seen that the many teachers who teach history in schools do not have a proper formal training, so they just teach. I mean, it is considered that everyone can teach history, right? So I think even those who study mathematics or geography or whatever, right? So you don't. I mean, it is. I mean, for example, if you want to teach science or mathematics, you need a special training, right? But for history, it doesn't consider that you need a. It is not considered that you need a special training. So therefore, so that's a kind of knowledge of history. That's a kind of perception of historical knowledge that I'm trying to question. So you might understand with this explanation that no, you need you need you need to understand what historical knowledge is, right? So that's what the objective of this lecture. I know that it is uh, it is somewhat difficult topic, particularly to I think the Gorden Leff's idea is somewhat simple, but Michael Oakeshott's ideas are somewhat complicated, and you need to listen several times, and let's discuss that in the class. Thank you.